Okay, we are moving on to the first chapter of this foundational book here, which hit us yesterday with that introduction that I hadn't read in probably 2 years, and it just it blew my mind all day again yesterday. So I'm excited to see what we've got here in this first chapter today. Okay, and it's called the preparation of the field and the formation of the atom. The third logos, the universal mind, begins his creative activity by working on the matter drawn in from the infinite space on every side for the building of our solar system. This matter exists in space in forms incognizable by us, but is apparently already shaped to the needs of vaster systems. We have been told by H.P. Blavatsky that the atomic subplanes of our planes make up the first or lowest cosmic plane. If we think of the atoms of that cosmic plane as symbolized by a musical note, our atoms, as formed by the third logos, may perhaps be symbolized by the overtones in such a note. What seems clear is that they are in close relation to the atoms of space, correspond with them, but are not, in their present form, identical with them. But the 7 types of matter that become our atoms are indicated in the matter drawn from space to form the solar system, and are ultimately reducible again to them. HPB hints at the repeated 7-fold division into atoms of lower and lower grade when she writes, the one cosmic atom becomes 7 atoms on the plane of matter, and each is transformed into a center of energy. That same atoms becomes 7 rays on the plane of spirit, separate till the end of the kalpa, and yet in close embrace. And that's from the Secret Doctrine. Outside the limits of a universe, this matter is in a very peculiar state. The 3 qualities of matter, inertia, mobility, and rhythm, which we know as tamas, rajas, and sattva, in that order, inertia, mobility, and rhythm, are balanced against each other. Excuse me, I was out working out in the yard again. And are in a state of equilibrium. They might be thought of as existing as a closed circle, quiescent. In fact, in some ancient books, matter in its totality is described in this state as inertia. It is also spoken of as virgin. It is the celestial Virgin Mary, the ocean of virgin matter, that is to become the mother by the action of the third logos. The beginning of creative activity is the breaking of that closed circle, throwing the qualities out of stable into unstable equilibrium. Life is motion, and the life of the solar logos, his breath. Life is motion, and the life of the solar logos, his breath, as it is poetically called, touching this quiescent matter through the qualities into a condition of unstable equilibrium, and therefore of continual motion in relation to each other. During the life period of a universe, matter is ever in a condition of incessant internal motion. HPB says, Fohat hardens and scatters the seven brothers, electrifies into life and separates primordial stuff or pregenic matter into atoms, electrifies into life and separates primordial stuff. The formation of the atom has three stages. First, the fixing of the limit within which the ensouling life, the life of the logos in the atom, shall vibrate. This limiting and fixing of the wavelength of the vibration is technically called the divine measure. This gives to the atoms of a plane their distinctive peculiarity. Wow, okay. Secondly, the logos marks out, according to this divine measure, the lines which determine the shape of the atom, the fundamental axis of growth, the angular relation of these, which determines the form, being that of the corresponding cosmic atom. The nearest analogy to these are the axes of crystals. Thirdly, by the measure of the vibration and the angular relation of the axis of growth with each other, the size and form of the surface, which we may call the surface or wall of the atom, is determined. Thus, in every atom, we have the measure of its ensouling life, its axis of growth, and its enclosing surface or wall. Of such atoms, the third logos creates 5 different kinds, the 5 different measures implying 5 different vibrations, and each kind forms the basic material of a plane. Each plane, however various the objects in it, has its own fundamental type of atom, into which any of its objects may ultimately be reduced. Now, we can't play with fire, and that just kind of hit me in this way. You can't play with fire. This is a whole different dangerous thing that we're looking at here. The epithet, spirit matter, will perhaps be better appreciated if we pause for a moment on the method of the formation of the atoms of the successive planes. And we're looking at them over here on the right. Right? These are the 7 planes that we're talking about. And look at, and if we can see in this, we have here the physical permanent atom, the astral permanent atom, the mental unit, and they're broken into 7. Right? So we're learning about this chart every step of the way here. And here's the mental permanent atom, the spiritual permanent atom, the atmic permanent atom, the Buddhic permanent atom. I'm sorry, that's the Buddhic permanent atom. Everybody see this? And then we have the atmic, and this is incredible. And these are the 5 permanent atoms, the 5 atoms that we talked about that make up these planes. Okay. For each system, the matter of space around it is its root of matter. Mula Prakriti, as the Hindus graphically call it. Well, this is so incredibly deep, and I'm so thankful to be reading this right now. It's really incredible. So the matter of each system has that surrounding matter for its root or base, and its own special matter grows out of, is developed from that. Okay? So the matter of each system that has surrounding matter for its root or base, and its own special matter grows out of, is developed from that. The logos, the oversoul of the system, drawing round himself the necessary matter from space, ensouls it with his own life, and this life within this subtle matter is mula prakriti, is the atma, the self, the spirit, in every particle. Fohat, the energy of the logos, says HPB, digs holes in space, and no description could be finer and truer. That whirling energy forms innumerable vortices, each shaped by the divine energy and axis of growth, and each shelled with the matter of space, atma in a shell of mula prakriti, spirit in a shell of matter, the atoms of the Adi, or highest plane, the first. And now we're talking about up here. Some of these remain as atoms, others join together and form molecules. Molecules join together and make more complex molecular combinations, and so on till 6 subplanes below the atomic are formed. This by analogy with what might be observed below, since these highest planes are incognizable. Now comes the forming of the atoms of the second plane, their measure and axis of growth being fixed as above, described by the third logos. Some of the atoms of the Adi, or first plane, draw round themselves a shell of the combinations of their own lowest subplane. Of their own lowest subplane. Now that would make these down here, as we're looking at this down here, right? So if we're coming down into the second, this would be the lowest subplane. The spirit plus its original shell of cosmic matter, mula prakriti, or the atom of the first plane, is the spirit of the second plane and permeates the new shell formed out of the lowest grade combinations of itself. These shells, thus ensouled, are the atoms of the anapadaka, or second plane. They're the atoms of the second plane. And these, okay, we're just going to keep going because this is so interesting. By the ever more complicated aggregations of these, the remaining 6 subplanes are brought into being. The atom, or some of the atoms of the anapadaka plane, right here, the second, in like manner, become clothed with the aggregations of their own lowest subplane, down here, just above this 3 here, and thus become the atomic atoms. And you can see this is the atomic plane. And spirit, now being clothed with two shells inside its atomic wall of aggregations of the lowest subplane of the anapadaka and the original spirit or life, and we're talking about the will up here, right? The monadic plane of the monadic plane, plus its two shells being called the spirit of the atomic plane, while the wall of its atom is regarded as the matter. Okay? This atom, ensheathed once more in the aggregations of the lowest atomic subplane, becomes the becomes the atom of the Buddhic plane. And now we're down here in the Buddhic plane. It becomes the atom. So the three from up here become combined, essentially, the spiritual, the atomic, the Buddhic. These three become the Buddhic. Spirit on the Buddhic plane, having thus three enclosing films within its atomic shell of lowest atomic aggregations, so from the plane above it. On the mental plane, now we're coming down into the mental plane here, the spirit has a fourfold sheath within the atomic wall. On the astral plane, a fivefold, and on the physical, a sixfold, with the atomic wall in each case in addition. But the spirit plus all its sheaths have the outermost, but the spirit plus all its sheaths have the outermost, save the outermost, is ever regarded as spirit, and the outermost sheath only as form or body. It is this involution of spirit which makes evolution possible, and complicated as the description may sound, the principle is simple and can be easily grasped. Truly, then, we may speak of spirit matter everywhere. And this is the union of spirit and matter here. Right? That's what we're doing. We're creating this union, essentially. Really, really awesome material. We're going to continue on here. So now we're going to get into the subplane. So now the ultimate atoms of the physical plane are not the atoms of the modern chemist. The ultimate atoms are aggregated into successive typical groups forming states of matter, and the chemical atom may be in the fifth, sixth, or seventh of these states, a gas, a liquid, or a solid. And we're talking about the lower subplanes. And here we can see this down below if we look. Gaseous, liquid, or solid dense. And above the gaseous are four less familiar conditions. The three etheric states of matter or subplanes, and the true atomic. So, we've got the three ethers here, and the original physical permanent atom, or the first ether, being the true atomic. the original true, the seventh original true. These true atoms are aggregated into groups, which then act as units, and these groups are called molecules. The atoms in a molecule are held together by magnetic attraction, and the molecules on each subplane are arranged geometrically in relation to each other on axes identical with the axis of growth of the atom of the corresponding plane. By these successive aggregations of atoms into molecules and of simpler into more complex molecules, the subplanes of each plane are formed under the directive activity of the third logos until the field of evolution, consisting of 5 planes, which we know what they are here, right? These 5 here: spiritual, or atmic, buddhic, monastic, astral, and physical. By these successive aggregations of atoms into molecules and of simpler into more complex molecules, the subplanes of each plane are formed under the directive activity of the third logos until the field of evolution, consisting of 5 planes, each showing 7 subplanes, the first and second planes being beyond this field. The top 2 here are beyond this field, is completed. So, let me read this again. By these successive aggregations of atoms into molecules and of simpler into more complex molecules, the subplanes of each plane are formed under the directive activity of the third logos, rare activity, until the field of evolution, consisting of 5 planes, each showing 7 subplanes, the first and second planes being beyond this field, is completed. But it must not be supposed that these 7 subplanes, as formed by the third logos, are at all identical with those which are now existing. Taking the physical plane as an illustration, they bear something of the same relation to the present subplanes as that which the chemist calls proto-hydrogen bears to the chemical element said to be built up out of it. The present conditions were not brought about by the work of the third logos only, in whom activity predominates. The more strongly attractive or cohesive energies of the second logos, who is wisdom and therefore love, were needed for the further integrations. It is important to remember that the planes are interpenetrating and that corresponding subplanes are directly related to each other and are not really separated from each other by intervening layers of dense matter. Thus, we must not think of the atomic subplanes as being separated from each other by 6 subplanes of generally increasing density, but as being in immediate connection with each other. We may figure this in a diagram as follows. It must be understood that this is a diagram, not a picture, i.e. it represents relations, not material facts. The relations existing between the planes by virtue of their intermingling, and not 49 separate bricks placed in 7 rows, one on top of each other. Now this relation is a most important one, for it implies that life can pass from plane to plane by the short road of the communicating atomic subplanes, and this need not necessarily circle round through the 6 molecular subplanes before it can reach the next atomic subplane to continue its descent. As a matter of fact, we shall find presently that life streams from the monad do follow this atomic road in their descent to the physical plane. If we now consider a physical atom, looking at it as a whole, we see a vortex of life, the life of the third logos, whirling with inconceivable rapidity. By the attraction between these whirling vortices, molecules are built up, and the plane with its subplanes formed. But at the limiting surface of this whirling vortex are the spirilla, whirling currents, each at right angles to the one within it and the one without it or outside it. These whirling currents are made by the life of the monad, not by the life of the third logos, and are not present at the early stage we are considering. They develop one after another into full activity in the course of evolution, normally one in each round. The rudiments are indeed completed by the fourth round by the action of the second logos, but the life stream of the monad circulates in only 4 of them, the other 3 being but faintly indicated. The atoms of the higher planes are formed on the same general plan as regards the logic central vortex, or the lugoic central vortex, I think, and its enclosing currents, but all details are at present lacking to us. Many of the practices of yoga are directed to bring about the more rapid evolution of the atoms by quickening the spirilla vivifying work of the monad upon it. As these currents of the monadic life are added to the lugoic vortex or logic vortex, the note of life grows richer and richer in its quality. We may compare the central vortex to the fundamental note, the whirling and circling currents to the overtones. The addition of each overtone means an added richness to the note. New forces, new beauties are thus ever added to the 7-fold chord of life. The 5 planes, the different responses which the matter of the planes will later give under the impulse of consciousness, depend on the work of the third logos, on the measure by which he limits the atom. The atom of each plane has its own measure, as we have seen, and this limits its power of response, its vibratory action, and gives it its specific character. As the eye is so constituted that it is able to respond to vibrations of ether within a certain range, so is each type of atom, by its constitution, able to respond to vibrations within a certain range. One plane is called the plane of mind stuff because the measure of its atoms makes their dominant response that which answers to a certain range of the vibrations of the knowledge aspect of the logos as modified by the creative activity. Another is called the plane of desire stuff, this is the astral, because the measure of its atoms make their dominant response that which will answer to a certain range of the vibrations of the will aspect of the logos. Each type of atom has thus its own peculiar power of response, determined by its own measure of vibration. In each atom lie involved numberless possibilities of response to the 3 aspects of consciousness these up here, again, these are the three aspects. And these possibilities within the atom will be brought out of the atom as powers in the course of evolution. But the capacity of the matter to respond and the nature of the response, these are determined by the original action of the triple self on it, and by the measure imposed on the atoms by the third logos. He, out of the infinite capacity of his own multitude of vibratory powers, gives a certain portion to the matter of a particular system in a particular cycle of evolution. This capacity is stamped on matter by the third logos and is ever maintained in matter by his life enfolded in the atom. Thus is formed the fivefold field of evolution in which consciousness is to develop. This work of the third logos is usually spoken of as the first life wave. That was awesome. If you study the decay material, Alice Bailey and Ageless Wisdom, and we state, and we use this chart and the 7 planes of our solar system, the cosmic physical plane, and the constitution of man as reference constantly, which I do. And you see, I actually have the chart up on my wall. I had it blown up, or I blew it up, and I had it put on the cardboard, the foam board at Staples, because I sit back over here and I will meditate upon the chart quite often and bounce it off of what I've read off of it and try to place these things and grow this picture. And it really does come together. Right? So if you want that, if you want this, I'd be happy to send it to you. You can just shoot me an email at the website on Warriors Charts, and I'll send you a copy of this chart for to have made. But this is just absolutely incredible. I told Carla that we were, and Carla, my mentor, who I told her we were going to be, that I was reading this, and she said it's absolutely foundational, and that this particular book is invaluable to understanding the decay material. It's a foundation you haven't seen anywhere else, and it's easy to understand language, and we had read it before, but again, it's all coming back around, and this is just awesome. So, okay, I'm going to leave it there for today, and we'll pick up on chapter 2 tomorrow. So, thanks.